Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Everyday Saturday. I'm Matt Stahl, along with my partner, Brad Gatto.
Hello, Matt Stahl.
Hello, Brad. Howdy, howdy. It's still yours today. Today, we are going to be talking about the great wealth transfer.
The great wealth transfer. Right. You know what it makes me think of?
What's that?
Charlie Brown.
Ooh,
You know why?
why?
Can you connect those dots?
No. No.
What is the name of the Charlie Brown movie for Halloween?
I don't remember.
The Great Pumpkin.
Oh, okay.
Remember when Charlie Brown has to find the Great Pumpkin?
You don't
remember that?
I'm not like a huge Charlie Brown fan. I don't.
Well, neither am I. But come on. We're like the same age almost. We grew up with Charlie Brown, man.
We are millennials, which we'll get to.
Gosh.
What is a great wealth transfer? We will get to that shortly. Before we do that, Brad, what have you been up to?
A lot. Been a busy season. One of the most interesting things I can tell you is I spent a couple of days in New York last week.
Yes.
Not last week. Last week was Thanksgiving as we record this. But the week before that, I guess. So 2 weeks ago. And I recorded my book as an audiobook.
That sounds awesome.
And it was hard.
Yes. I bet.
So
sounds so simple.
Yeah, I actually just got the recording of it back. I just got what they think is the final clip or whatever, and I have to actually listen to myself read my book, which is also weird to see if I noticed anything. But yeah, man, it's been an interesting and fun process creating not every day Saturday. That's the name of this podcast, but spending money and having fun. Your practical guide to a fearless retirement. You can find it on Amazon. There you go. It's been a labor of love getting it into an audiobook, but it's definitely because we work with families all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted an easier way to get that information into their hands other than just drop shipping them a book through snail mail. So
I think it's a smart move because I listen to more books than I read these days. And I think you do the same. So.
It is the more people I talk to, Matt, it is crazy how most people are really one or the other.
Yeah.
They're very, there's certain people that are like, I would never do audiobooks. And then other people are like, I don't ever read actual paper books anymore. It's all audiobooks. So I'm one of the weird kind of in between. I do both. The audiobook thing for me is like, and this is my biggest fear with the audiobook. A lot of it has to do with the reader.
It does. You're on the spot, man.
I know. I'm not saying I would listen to myself. That's not my point. Because I don't know yet. But
how many hours a day were you reading?
It took 2 full days in studio. So 8 hours, 2 days.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot of sitting in front of a microphone and reading.
Huh.
You don't realize how much you mumble until somebody points out every time you do it.
I'm sure.
No, you stumbled through that word. You got to go back and do that again. So anyway, how about you, man? What have you been up to?
Well, holiday season kicked off. So it was great to see some family. We had a much more pleasant season than we did last year. Last year we didn't actually get to celebrate Thanksgiving with anyone because we were dealing with some sickness with our youngest. So this year was awesome.
There you go.
Great. And that's about it. I have a project I've been working on. I just hosted a retreat somewhat recently, and that went incredibly well. And
awesome.
It felt like it was like the last of the lingering nice weather we had.
Yeah.
It has evaporated since.
Yeah, now it's cold. Now it's Minnesota.
Yeah.
When you think about Thanksgiving, when you visualize your plate in front of you, what is your favorite Thanksgiving food? What are you most excited to eat on that plate?
This is going to sound incredibly boring. Turkey.
You're just a straight turkey guy.
Yeah.
Gravy, no gravy.
This year I did gravy. It has to be good. So, and I almost like
what a caveat.
So I almost like the leftover turkey better than I do the day of, though. So
really?
Yeah, I feel
that way with like Italian food, like spaghetti and lasagna. I don't feel that way with turkey because it gets dry.
Oh, I love it. Like with mayo left over, delicious.
Well, okay, if you're putting mayo on it,
yeah,
it is good as a sandwich. Like making sandwiches with it the next day.
Yeah.
I'm a green bean casserole guy.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually tend to save it to the last because I don't want to like eat it. I also I don't know if every family does this, but our family does deviled eggs at Thanksgiving
Oh,
too. I love deviled eggs.
We don't do them on Thanksgiving.
It's the only reason I try to get to the front of the line or even care about being anywhere other than last, because there's never any left.
I love them. Yeah.
It's deviled eggs. So
delicious.
Well, thanks for coming to this episode of
Yep. See you later.
a long rant on Thanksgiving. But we're actually here to talk about the great wealth transfer. I should have an echoey voice when I say that. So Matt, as we get into this, we should probably define what it is. So what in the world are we talking about? What is the great wealth transfer?
Yeah. So great wealth transfer, think about these different generations, and specifically what we're going to be zeroing in on is the baby boomer generation. So that is
see, if you're recording an audiobook, you'd have to go do that all over again.
I said boomer. The baby boomers born between the years 1946 to 1960. The generation prior to them is the silent generation. Then we have Generation X and millennials. And we were just talking earlier today. Brad and I are technically millennials, which is kind of bonkers. But
there's a lot of tags you can give people, and I don't know why that one of all the tags you could give me seems most offensive.
It does. I mean,
because I feel like they get a bad rap.
Yeah,
millennials definitely get a bad rap, especially with like the boomers.
Yeah, well, it is from 1981 to 1996.
It's a long.
We are on the very tip of that.
There is a term for like the early millennials, and I don't remember what it is, but early millennials like you and I have tried to distance themselves from the later ones, the ones born in the 90s. I don't remember what it is, but anyway, we're technically millennials.
So what we're looking at is the baby boomers, specifically between those years in 1946 and 1964. Half of the wealth in the United States of America is in the hands of baby boomers,
which is crazy because the silent generation, although they're, getting quite old at this point, and so it is a shrinking population because of age. That Generation X, millennials, are all adults at this point. Even the youngest millennials are 27, 28, 28.
Yeah. Crazy.
Even though there's technically 4 generations still alive today that are adults and in the working phases of their career, half of all of the wealth is with that one generation.
What's that number?
$78.29 trillion. Don't forget the 0.29 because that's 290 billion.
Just a little rounding there
with a B.
That's a lot of money. So, so what is the great wealth transfer? So we have this generation of baby boomers that are aging, and a lot of them have families, and a lot of them have children. Some of them don't, but eventually, as they continue to age, that wealth is going to go somewhere. And just kind of to bring this closer to home, what we have observed historically is a lot of these people, they're not going to spend a lot of that money. Definitely not all of it. And there's a tendency to continue to let that accumulate more and more.
Well, and economists like to follow the bouncing ball, right? Follow the money and see what's going on in the economy, velocity of money, when it's changing hands, why it's changing hands, where people are saving, where they're spending, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot you can tell from kind of following that bouncing ball around. And so as the boomers were born, the economists have been following them around because they, at that time, they were the largest generation ever in our country. And one of the phrases I've heard in the past is that the baby boomers were like a basketball going through a garden hose. Mm-hmm. And they've created Fortune 500 companies and wealth along the way as they went from, children all the way through now getting into retirement age. And so following that generation around has been very, economists it's like one of their favorite things to do. And so now the big thing with boomers is, well, gosh, they're not only are they starting to retire, but they're not really spending the money.
Right.
It's not coming back out. Like they put all this money away, and some of them are, but not at any significant clip. And so it stands to reason if they don't spend it on their fun and lifestyle, that they're going to end up giving it to somebody else. Hence the great wealth transfer.
Right.
Why should we care, Matt?
Well, we should care because these different generations, they spend, they invest, they everything they do very differently. So the ramifications of that transfer from one generation to the next can change how our economy looks in a big way. So
yeah, so it could have a massive economic impact and probably will. I don't know if that's a could. It's probably going to.
yeah,
right.
So that's one piece. That's very, very big picture. So that'd be more the macro. When we zoom in micro, there's a lot of moving parts there. So if we zoom in all the way to one family in particular, so if we're zoom way out and zoom way in,
A lot of zooming,
and then we're going to zoom back out and back. A medium zoom, and then
follow this bouncing ball.
So no, zoom in on the micro. If we look at one example family, it's just all the different moving parts that are there. And number one, what are the potential pitfalls of the logistics of that transfer?
So I'm a baby boomer, and I am trying to think through the process of what if when I pass away, I still have some of the wealth that I've created. Now, first and foremost, Matt, important to understand that when we're talking about the great wealth transfer, it's not just your investable assets and the money that you've saved in your savings account to a brokerage account to your retirement accounts and anything in between. It's also your physical assets,
right?
Because homeownership has become a much more popular is not the right word, but like homeownership's been far more accessible since the baby boomer generation. So most of them own homes and have a significant amount of physical assets as well. And so when we're looking at the transfer of their wealth, it could also be called their estate. It's all of it.
Right.
And so what are some of the things that you need to think about, and what are some of the potential pitfalls you need to be aware of should you have an estate to pass on to the next generation?
Yeah. So from the standpoint of brass tacks, it's taxes themselves are a big thing, right? So
one of the first pitfalls is taxes.
Yeah. So we start thinking about this, and taxes can come in several different forms. We have estate taxes at a federal level. We possibly have estate taxes at a state level. We also have income tax with respect to the decedent.
In other words, if you have ordinary income tax bills you have not paid, they don't go away. They go to whoever you give the money to, and then they have to pay those income tax bills.
Yes. So not understanding how all that works, number one, could be a really, really big issue. And
so bottom line is you need to have a tax plan, not
Yes.
just for possible death taxes. And this idea of when I die, the IRS or the state is going to step in and add an additional tax to the passing of my estate, which is possible. You have to have a pretty significant net worth federally. And then depending on the state that you live in, you may or may not even have one. But then also, and I actually think this is the most common, well, everybody's got ordinary income taxes. We all deal with this. If you have any sort of income, any sort of assets, even if you just live on Social Security, you have to pay ordinary income taxes typically. So with that being said, understanding what is sitting there inside of your estate that you still owe ordinary income taxes on and how that's going to affect that wealth transfer. So a lot to think about when it relates to taxes. What is a second pitfall?
The second pitfall is less concrete, I would say, and is more, how do you communicate the why? So if you're passing this from one generation to the next, and we've talked about this a bit, but it is a chunk of money. A lot of times I feel like people assume that money is going to solve problems and only good can come from that. Yep. And the opposite can also be true. And if a person is not ready for that money, then really, really bad things can happen. And so a big piece of this is the behavioral finance aspect of this whole transfer.
So if I were to summarize what you just said and try to bring it down to a point, it's having conversations not only about what you have and who's going to get that, but the why of why am I going to give whatever it is that I have, a physical asset like my house or land or whatever, or even certain pieces of jewelry. Like, I've got 2 daughters and I'm trying to split up all my fine jewelry between the daughters. Why did I give this ring to this one and this ring to this other one? That kind of conversation, so that when the gifts are given or the estate is passed, that it doesn't create the potential pitfall of animosity, bad decisions, because money in the wrong hands or unexpected wealth that isn't prepared for mentally. As we all know, the extreme examples of the lottery, most people that win the lottery are broke within 5 years because it's unexpected wealth. There was no plan. And obviously money can do a lot of good, but we all know it can also do a lot of bad. So thinking through the why aspect of your wealth and what you want to have happen, and then taking that information, that knowledge that you have, those wishes that you have, and also passing that on to the next generation, not just the actual asset itself.
Right. So the communication part.
Pass your wishes. Pass. See, now you know why it took 2 full days to read my book. Pass your wishes along with your assets.
Yes, and I would actually argue that the easy part is the numbers part.
Yeah,
it's the will, it's the trust. The difficult part is actually the communication piece.
Yeah.
It's, all right, we made this decision because of this. This is what we actually want to pass on.
Yep.
Is this value or that, as opposed to this piece of jewelry is going to so-and-so, this is going to so-and-so.
So I would say that that's a great segue into the third big pitfall that we're going to talk about here, is that the blocking and tackling, the actual creation of legal documents so that your wishes are held.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? Your wishes are
upheld?
Upheld? We'll go with
that.
upheld. That sounds better.
Yeah, I like that.
This is the powers of attorney, the healthcare directives, which of course are documents for while you're alive, and that your wishes of how you should be taken care of or you want to be taken care of, whether that's, health related through a healthcare directive, or that's just something more general through something like power of attorney, just making sure that your affairs and that your wishes for your care and where you want care and how you want healthcare are fulfilled. These documents allow you to do that. And then, of course, the obvious things of a will or possibly even a trust, so that after you pass away, the legalese of how your estate is going to get from you to anybody else, and who it's supposed to go to and when it's supposed to go to, are fulfilled either through probate in the state in which you live, or done through the trust that you leave behind.
And we actually, I want to share a couple statistics. We know that this has not been covered by everybody, because, Brad, do you remember the percentage of Americans that have a will?
I do, because I think I'm the one that found it. It's 32%. 32.
So only 32% of Americans have a will. And another really, really interesting statistic that Brad also dug up was 52% of people don't know where their parents store their estate planning documents. So even if they have an estate planning document put in place, there hasn't been communication about what that is or where it is.
Yeah. And just to kind of summarize these pitfalls, right? Because the first pitfall that we talked about was taxes. The second pitfall we talked about was passing the why along with the how. And then this third one is this idea of just not having the how at all, not having wills or trusts or whatever it may be. I just was talking to a family the other day. I was doing an estate planning workshop, and I had a couple come up to me afterwards, and it was like this quintessential situation where family has farmland, and the parents that are now passed away that acquired the farmland, of course, were emotionally attached to it and worked their butt off for it. And so because all their blood, sweat, and tears was in that farmland, they didn't want to see the family ever get rid of it. So they passed it on, but it went to 4 different kids. What do you suppose the odds are that those 4 kids agree with how that farmland should be handled?
Very low.
Very low. And the other issue is the emotion of, hey, dad said we should keep the land. And so even if financially that doesn't make sense for the family or whatever it may be, then there's this emotional attachment of dad said we should do this. And so it just can get really, really messy if there everybody's not clear on what is there and how it's going to get to who it's going to get to, but the why of why you set it up that way. And then, of course, cut that out. All right, I'm going to count myself back in for editing. Maybe. All right. 3, 2, 1. So getting it all right, all 3 aspects right, and avoiding those pitfalls really makes sense, because we got to disinherit the IRS as much as possible. Nobody wants, if you've got 4 kids, nobody wants the 5th kid, the IRS, to get more money than the other 4.
That's right.
Right. All right. So that being said, what is, like, practically, Matt?
Yep.
What is something that anybody who's listening to this podcast could do today or should do today to improve the likelihood or chances that this estate that they have, that they've worked so hard for, actually ends up in the hands of the people they want it to end up in, and that it becomes a positive experience for them in their life and not a negative?
Yeah. So I'd say step number 1 is reach out to your advisor. If you have a fiat advisor, you have already
why an advisor, Matt, not an attorney? Because when I think of estate planning, I think of an attorney.
That's a great question. So the way I've always described it is a good financial advisor is going to ask the right questions, so you are prepared when you go to the attorney to actually prepare the documents. I think that the attorney, their role is to prepare the documents based on your instruction. However, not all attorneys, nor do I expect them to be that good about prompting the questions to their job is to draft documents and make sure it's in accordance with the state you're in. And they're not always going to have the perspective to know what's important to you and why. And so a good advisor has had those conversations with their client. They know what their values are. They know their why. They know all the background and all the history. So they're going to be able to prompt those questions. So I don't, if I'm going to get my estate documents drafted, I'm not wasting time when I go to the estate planning attorney. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's a great question. So that's number 1. Just understanding what is your total estate and having that conversation with your advisor. Some people might already have that done, but let's understand what is actually included in there, how that looks, and then what are the
so kind of an inventory almost.
Yeah, for sure. What an inventory, but also a flow chart. Like, I pass away, what actually happens here?
Yeah.
What
That's a really good point, because most people that we talk to, Matt, that even if they have an estate plan, when you ask them, like, okay, well, how does it work? Like,
right.
what'd you come up with? Who gets what, and how does this work? And then most people are like,
right. Well,
I don't know.
It's really complicated. It's what account moves here and here and here. So that's step number 1. Then step number 2 is to ensure that
I thought step number 1 was call your advisor.
It was. I said,
oh,
yeah.
And then step number 2 is the inventory.
Yes.
Okay.
Inventory.
I'm following you now, sir.
Step number 3 is, if you don't have the documents completed, the basic documents, the will, the trust, the power of attorney, the healthcare directive, we need to get those done.
Yep.
Right. Weaved in with that should be the why. And if you're having the correct conversations, you're going to know what those are. But getting those documents in place, then the next step is actually communicating. I would argue is communicating that with the rest of the family. And that would be having a family meeting. Ideally, it's facilitated by an advisor or someone, or just self-facilitated, where we're actually having the conversation to explain, this is where everything is at. This is how you access it. This is who the executor is. Everybody feels comfortable and they understand the why. So, if I left this to Owen and I left this to Charlie, I explained to them what my rationale was, so they're not left wondering without closure.
Yeah. So I'm going to summarize that.
Yep.
Step 1 is to call fiat. Step 2 is to let us help you inventory or understand the total or the totality of your estate.
Mm-hmm.
Step 3 is to procure or acquire the legal documents that you need to have your wishes granted upon your passing, which we can also help with because of a strategic partnership that we have with wealth.com. And then step number 4 is to inform your family of where the legal documents are and why you drafted them the way that you did. I just think of my boys when you were saying that. I only have 2, but even though I only have 2, they're very, very different. And so when I start thinking through like personal assets and, you know, if something were to happen to me today, what would I want my older son Liam to have? And what would I want my younger son Hudson to have? The answer is very different.
Right.
And it's because I think I'm benefiting them. You know, I would give Liam something I would never give Hudson. I'll just prime example. Liam's more outdoorsy. So something that, you know, would fit kind of that bill. I think Liam should probably have that. That makes more sense to me. Hudson likes sports more than Liam. They both like sports, but Hudson likes it more than Liam does. And so I probably want him to have more of the sports memorabilia and things of that nature. But I can see how if I had not explained that to them ahead of time,
right,
they might be offended of like, well, why did dad give you that?
Yes.
And why did I end up with this? And there can be hurt feelings. Whereas if I help them understand how I came up with that, there's a lot better likelihood that the passing of my estate is going to end up being a positive experience for them and not a negative.
Right. Yep.
So there's 4 steps. The coolest part about all 4 steps is we can help you with all of them. And so if you don't have people in your life helping you with this stuff, I would recommend or encourage you to reach out to us here at Fiat. You can find all of our contact information at our website. It's Fiat, FIATWM.com. This is an underserved, underutilized, and not talked about enough area of financial planning. Because at the end of the day, the odds that you pass away bouncing your last paycheck to the undertaker are not good. And nobody wants to die the richest person in the cemetery either. And so I've given you 2 kind of little quotes there. The last one and the third one I'm going to give you is this. And I heard this on a podcast recently, a different podcast, not ours, but I thought it was great. There's an old Chinese proverb that's over 2,000 years old that says that wealth does not go beyond the 3rd generation. Because by the time you get, and essentially the reason they're saying that is because by the time you get to that 3rd generation, the blood, sweat, and tears that it took to create that wealth is no longer there. And the money just becomes money. That dollar that they're given through that estate is no different than a dollar that they're given from anything else. There's no emotion attached to it anymore because they don't even know the person that earned it.
Right.
Because they're too far up the family tree. And so thinking through that and thinking about that should affect the way that you do your estate planning. So with all that being said, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to help you begin down this journey of creating a better estate plan for yourself and for your family. And whether that's for you, for your kids, or it's for all of you, we would love to be a part of that. So again, FIATWM.com. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Matt?
No, love the proverb. I'm gonna use that.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Every Day is Saturday. Again, my name is Brad Gatto here with Matt Stahl. I'm going to cut that out too. I'm going to start again on that, and we're going to edit that out. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Every Day is Saturday. My name is Brad Gatto. As always, here with my partner in crime in our podcast, Mr. Matt Stahl. Thanks for joining me, Matt. And we will see all of you next Saturday.